7 days and counting until massive and painful across-the-board budget cuts are triggered if no deal is reached to avert the sequester. Joining me now, Republican Congressman Tom Cole of Oklahoma. Good to have you back on the program. Good morning.
Chris, great to be with you.
A little earlier in the hour, I talked to Congresswoman and DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz about this. Here's what she said.
Leverage. They consider a looming government shutdown 3 weeks later leverage so they can get the severe, unacceptable spending cuts that they want and protect the tax breaks that they've been trying to protect for the wealthiest Americans.
Is that what's going on here, Congressman?
Well, of course not. We're finally trying to get serious about actually dealing with trillion-dollar budget deficits. We've acted twice in May and December to try and redistribute the cuts away from a lot of the affected areas, particularly the military and first responders. The Senate's never picked those bills up. The President's actually never really put a proposal on the table. He's been engaged in a theatrical, political-style campaign. Finally calls the Speaker and the Republican leader in the Senate yesterday. First time he talked to either of them in 6 weeks. Sounds to me like he's much more interested in scoring political points than actually solving the problem.
Well, it does seem that your side is intractable, though. In spite of the headlines that we're seeing out there, we talked about this earlier as well. Federal workers worried about how they're going to pay their bills. Agencies like FBI, Border Patrol would lose 1,000 agents. More than 31,000 teachers could be laid off. Air travelers could face lengthy delays in security lines and on the tarmac, with nearly 47,000 FAA employees facing furlough. These are just a few of the examples. How do you...
Chris, I'm very aware of it. We're anything but intractable. I mean, frankly, we're the only ones that have actually passed a solution. We have offered repeatedly to sit down with the President. And remember, he's talked a lot about a balanced approach. He just got 6 weeks ago revenue with no spending cuts, and that was written into law. Fair enough. Now it should be spending cuts with no revenue. That's the real balance. Instead, he wants to have his cake and eat it too. And again, we acted months ago, acted twice last year. The President actually suggested sequester in the first place, has never put a proposal on the table. You know, to us, it looks much more like politics on his part than a serious effort to arrive at an agreement.
Well, the American people seem to think that the President is doing his job better than you are. The new USA Today Pew poll shows 49% of Americans would blame congressional Republicans for not reaching a deal, while 31% would blame President Obama. Is that an indication you might want to reconsider both your position and your tactics?
Well, I'm certainly willing to reconsider anything in terms of where the cuts come from, and I think our side's consistently shown that we're willing to do that. The President is the one that's intractable here. He has to have another tax increase within 6 weeks of the last tax increase. And what he's doing may be effective in terms of scoring political points, but as somebody who, by the way, worked with him on the fiscal cliff, works with him on violence against women, worked with him on Sandy relief, I'm just telling him that this is, an absolutely terrible miscalculation. It's going to be legislatively ineffective. It's going to backfire. If he would sit down and bargain in good faith, accept that these spending cuts were written into law, they were his idea, he advocated for them, he signed the bill, and accept some responsibility, we could make some progress. But again, so far I think this is all politics out of the White House. It's not any sort of effort to arrive at a solution. And you mentioned,
Congressman, let me just ask you while we still have time, you mentioned the Violence Against Women Act, and it's been a week since the bipartisan Senate majority reauthorized it after it died in the last Congress. Although it's still unclear what happened in the House with this legislation, there are reports House Republicans will unveil their own version as early as next week. What can you tell me about that, and how do you get your Republican colleagues on board?
Well, we've been working awfully hard on that. One of the main sticking points is empowering tribal courts on Indian land to have jurisdiction over non-tribal members, something that I support. And Representative Weiss and I actually have a bill that takes care of that, and I think it would be terrific if that were the compromise language in the Republican-based text. I don't know if it is. I would hope we get an opportunity to offer that as an amendment. We've made a lot of progress in this area. I particularly want to congratulate or thank the Majority Leader, Eric Cantor, who's worked with us on this, but we're not there yet, and there's still negotiations, discussions going on. But I'm hopeful we can get it done and pass this really important piece of legislation.
Is it likely it's going to happen?
You know, I think the odds are better that it will than it won't. And again, if we can solve the tribal problem, I'll certainly be supportive. This is one of the great classes of women that are subject to sexual assault, the worst statistics in the country. We need to give tribes the jurisdictional and policing tools that they require to deal with this problem on their own land. We do it across the rest of the country. We ought to do it on Indian reservations as well. So there's an easy fix here, in my view. Some people have concerns about it. I'm always happy to discuss them. But at the end of the day, we fix that problem. I think we've got a bill.
Congressman Tom Cole, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Today's tweet.